News and information junkies are understandably focused on the images and news from Japan, but I want to do another review of some of the articles I read in today's New York Times. By the time you're done listening to this video, you might think the news coming out of Japan is actually good news. So Floyd Norris, who writes a column on financial matters, talks about a report issued by the IMF, International Monetary Fund, in which a couple of economists concluded finally, after all these 2 years since the financial crisis hit, that so far the major countries have only treated the symptoms and have not done anything to address the root causes of the financial crisis. No shit. Anyone who's been paying a half a brain of attention for the past 2 or 3 years knows that we've only treated the symptoms. So this report is, well, it's long overdue. I'm glad that the IMF is finally issuing it, but man, they're slow at catching on. Meanwhile, in Europe, Portugal and Greece, although they had some rescue packages and arrangements a while back, are still in trouble. Portugal may still need a bailout. Greece may still need a debt restructuring. So the financial crisis is far from over on a macro scale and far from over on a micro scale when you look at all the struggles and unemployment in this country and others. So on to Afghanistan. The U.S. military released a report, I guess they're proud of this, I'm not sure, in which they said that only 12% of the civilian casualties in Afghanistan are caused by U.S. and NATO forces. 12% of the civilian casualties is a huge number, and the UN report puts it at 25%, and the U.S. military spokespeople say that they can't even really deny the UN number. So of all the civilians being killed in Afghanistan, 25%, 1/4 of them are being killed by the U.S. and NATO forces. That's terrible. What is going on there? And there's this great drama over the death of Hamid Karzai's cousin in one of these military raids. It appears that the U.S., either deliberately or unwittingly, is now involved in this inter-Karzai clan family feud, and I'm sure that the U.S. military was set up by one Karzai to take out this other Karzai and make it look like an accident. But it's terrible what's going on there. There's an article in the New York Times today about how U.S. and Egyptian military officials meet once a year to go over the Egyptians' wish list for military equipment that they want to buy from the U.S. with the money that the U.S. gives Egypt to buy this equipment. It's such a terrible example of the circle of money flowing around in the military-industrial complex. It's really disgusting because these Egyptian generals come to the U.S., they stay in fancy hotels and have expensive dinners, and they reserve one day of their trip every 2 years to go to the malls to hit the shopping. And then the U.S. alternates by sending our people over to Egypt on the other years. Terrible arrangement that we've had with U.S. and still have U.S. Terrible arrangement, this U.S.-Egyptian military alliance. Nobody's winning except the military contractors. The New York Times has a bunch of editorials and articles talking about how Obama has abandoned ideals in the Middle East and he's just going for pragmatism. Terrible. He's abandoned efforts, or at least appeared to abandon efforts to do anything about climate change. Terrible. Paul Krugman has a column in which he highlights how Republicans are just doing everything they can to block any innovative funding in Medicare to do research on the medical procedures funded by Medicare to see which ones are effective and which ones aren't. If we have any hope of reducing medical costs, we have to, among many things, reduce unnecessary procedures, and unless we know what's necessary and what's not, by researching it and putting some money into it, we're never going to know. And then on top of all this, to wrap it up, there's a little editorial describing how the FEC, Federal Election Commission, refuses to issue any penalties or take any enforcement action against many confirmed election violations, both by Republicans and Democrats, it turns out, according to the editorial. So the whole democratic system is corrupt and broken, and the Federal Election Commission, which should be one of the cops on the beat, isn't doing anything about it. There's 6 people on the commission. Every vote is deadlocked 3-3. Nothing ever happens. All right, back to Japan. That should be nice.